Have you ever looked around and realized that the people you care about don't seem to care the same way back? That no matter how available, kind, or loyal you are, you're the one being ignored, overlooked, or even disrespected? Maybe you've told yourself it's just bad luck. Or maybe you've convinced yourself that people are just too self-centered to notice how much you do for them. But the truth is darker. They treat you that way because you trained them to. It's a hard pill to swallow. But every time you said it's okay when it wasn't, every time you smiled when you wanted to scream, every time you forgave what should have been confronted, you weren't being noble. You were being conditioned. And worse, you were conditioning them. People learn how to treat you based on what you tolerate. Every silence, every nod, every forced agreement becomes a signal. This is allowed. You can cross this line. And before you realize it, you've become the emotional doormat of the people you thought would protect you. But they don't. And they won't. Because deep down, they don't even realize they're doing anything wrong. You made it seem normal. From a very young age, you were programmed to believe that being nice is the safest path. That if you avoid conflict, if you're always available, if you never make a fuss, people will like you more. But here's the truth no one told you. What people like is convenience. What they respect is presence. And these two don't always come together. Being liked because you're easy to manipulate is not a victory. It's a trap. You're applauded for being agreeable but secretly dismissed as someone who can be used. Carl Jung once said, "What you accept without question you eventually call fate." That means your current situation, the lack of respect, the one-sided relationships, the feeling of emotional exhaustion, isn't just happening to you. It's happening through you. And the root of that lies in your inability to say no, not just to people, but to the emotional role you've been playing your entire life. The role of the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who absorbs everyone's chaos, just so the connection doesn't break. But do you ever stop to ask, why am I the only one doing that? Why am I always the one swallowing pain just to keep the peace? And why does it seem like the more I try to show love, the less love I actually receive? The answer is brutal. People cannot respect someone who constantly betrays themselves. And whether you realize it or not, that's exactly what you've been doing. Betraying yourself to be accepted. If this message resonated with a silent part of you, type in the comments, "I will no longer betray myself to be accepted." Let the world see your turning point. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone keeps showing up late to meet you. The first time you say, "Don't worry about it." The second time you smile and pretend it's fine. The third time you try to laugh it off, even though it's starting to bother you deeply. What happens next? They keep doing it. Not because they're evil, but because you made it seem acceptable. You were training them, silently, to treat your time as disposable. The moment you chose silence over boundaries, you gave permission. Now scale that up. Apply it to relationships where you're always the one who checks in first. Friendships where you do all the listening but never get asked how you are. Workplaces where you're praised for being so easy to work with, because you never complain, even when you're drowning. In all these cases, the reward for your silence is not gratitude, it's invisibility. And here's where it gets even more painful. After a while, you start believing that this is just how life is, that people will never change, that you're simply unlucky. But what really happened is this. You lost your sense of worth in the name of being nice. You've confused peacekeeping with self-erasure. And Carl Jung warned us about this when he spoke of the dangers of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by others. That mask becomes so tightly glued to our faces that we forget who we are underneath. We forget what we deserve, and we begin to settle, not out of strength but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being seen as difficult, fear of losing people who, deep down, were never truly there for you. So you keep performing, you keep giving, you keep shrinking, and they keep taking, they keep expecting, they keep walking over your silence like it was never meant to speak. But here's the twist. Deep down, they feel your resentment, they sense your exhaustion, and it bothers them. Not because they care, but because it threatens the dynamic. They want the version of you who says yes, even when it hurts. They don't want the version of you that wakes up and starts setting limits. Because once that happens, they lose control. And that's what this entire dynamic is really about. Control. Not in an obvious manipulative way, but in a subtle, learned behavior way. The world has taught them that people like you, kind, quiet, always available. Don't fight back. Don't push back. Don't walk away. But what if that changed? What if the next time someone crossed your boundary you didn't explain yourself, didn't soften your tone, didn't backpedal? What if you simply stopped showing up for people who only show up when they need you? Can you imagine how that would feel? At first terrifying, then liberating. Because for the first time, you wouldn't be betraying yourself to keep a peace that never truly existed. You'd be choosing yourself. And that choice is the first step toward shifting the energy in every room you enter. That's what Carl Jung meant when he said that becoming conscious is not a gentle process. It's a radical act of reclaiming your power. So let me ask you, how many people in your life have you trained to treat you like you don't matter? How many situations have you tolerated just to avoid discomfort? And more importantly, how long do you plan to keep playing a role that's killing you silently? Because here's the truth. Until you break this cycle, the world will continue to mirror back the lie you've been living, that you are only valuable when you're useful, silent, and agreeable. But once you see the game, you can't unsee it. And in the next part, we'll expose exactly how that game works, how people unconsciously manipulate your silence, and why your absence can become the most powerful boundary you ever set. Have you ever noticed how people test your boundaries in small, subtle ways? At first, it's a comment disguised as a joke. Then, it's a request that feels like an obligation. A little later, it's them raising their voice in a conversation, cutting you off or ignoring what you just said, and you freeze. Not because you agree, but because you're used to letting it slide. It's not worth it, you whisper to yourself. It's better to keep the peace. But the truth is, that moment, the one you dismissed as nothing, was a lesson. Not for you, for them. Every time you don't react, don't push back, don't make it uncomfortable, they learn. They learn that your emotions don't demand respect, that your presence doesn't come with boundaries, that you're safe, not in a good way, but in the kind of way that means they can unload their chaos on you and walk away feeling lighter while you carry the weight they didn't want to hold. Psychologically, this is known as reinforcement. Just like a child learns to repeat behaviors that are rewarded, adults, whether they know it or not, repeat behaviors that are allowed. And if disrespect never meets resistance, it becomes the new standard. People don't just cross lines because they're cruel. They cross them because no one ever told them the line was there. That's why Carl Jung warned us. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But he also understood something deeper, that others don't just mirror us. They adapt to us. They shape their treatment of us based on how we teach them to behave. Let me give you a raw example. Imagine a friend who constantly talks over you. They don't even notice when you're speaking. They just hijack the conversation. You laugh it off. You let them finish. You never bring it up. Over time, what happens? They keep doing it, maybe even more often. And you start shrinking in the conversation. You speak less. You think more before interrupting. And now, without even realizing it, the dynamic is fixed. You're the listener. They're the speaker. And worse, if one day you do try to say something, they'll likely be shocked, offended, or dismissive. Because to them, your silence wasn't discomfort, it was agreement. And that's the danger of being easygoing. It sends the wrong message. People don't assume you're being kind. They assume you're being submissive. And in a world where power is felt in silence, your silence becomes your label. You're the one they vent to, but never ask about. You're the one they keep in their life not out of love, but out of usefulness. And you don't even know when the shift happened. That's how manipulation often works. Not through grand gestures, but through slow erosion. It doesn't scream. It whispers, and it tells you that you're doing the right thing by staying quiet. But are you? Carl Jung talked about the concept of psychic energy, the idea that your thoughts, emotions, and attention are forms of energy. And when you spend that energy constantly absorbing others' projections, complaints, and disrespect without confronting them, you're bleeding. Not physically, spiritually. And a person who's bleeding emotionally becomes weak, not because they were born that way, but because they've given so much of themselves away that there's nothing left to stand on. Think about the people in your life who always bring problems to your doorstep, who only call when they need something, who disappear when you need support. Why do they feel so comfortable doing that? Because over time you made yourself available to be used that way. You trained them, without words, that your needs come second, that your time doesn't require permission, that your silence is theirs to fill. And here's the trap. The more you allow this dynamic, the harder it becomes to escape it, because you've built a system where your discomfort feeds their comfort. And if you change now, if you start setting boundaries, speaking up, distancing yourself, they won't applaud your growth. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. You have changed. But not because you're cold, because you're finally realizing that your silence was never neutral. It was participation. This is why manipulation is so effective when it's unspoken. The manipulator doesn't have to say anything. All they have to do is keep getting what they want without resistance. They operate in your hesitation, in your guilt, in your overthinking. They rely on you choosing peace over power every single time. And the moment you begin to reclaim that power, the whole system shakes. Let's bring this even closer to home. Think about a toxic workplace where your boss piles tasks on you because you never say no. You're the one who stays late, the one who fixes others' mistakes. You don't complain. You don't make waves. And what's the result? You become the go-to person for everything except recognition. They promote the louder one. They reward the ones who push back. And you're left wondering, why does no one see how much I do? Because they do see. They just don't feel obligated to reward you. Why? Because you never demanded to be seen. You taught them that you're okay with being overlooked. And now, you're not just the helper. You're the shadow behind the success of others. The same pattern repeats in family dynamics, in friendships, in romantic relationships. The one who gives the most, forgives the most, understands the most, always ends up the most exhausted. Not because the world is cruel, but because silence is often mistaken for consent. So now we arrive at the real question. If your silence is teaching people how to mistreat you, what would your voice teach them? What would happen if you said, "No, I'm not okay with that"? What would happen if you let the room go quiet instead of filling it with nervous laughter? What would happen if you stopped showing up for people who vanish when you're the one in pain? Yes, there would be backlash. Yes, some people would walk away, but the ones who remain, those are the people who respect the real you, not the version of you that sacrificed your dignity for peace. Have you ever lost yourself just to keep someone else comfortable? Share your moment of awakening in the comments. Someone out there needs to read it today. Carl Jung believed that individuation, becoming your whole, authentic self, requires breaking the patterns you were once praised for. And that's not easy, but it's necessary. Because if you don't, you'll spend your life surrounded by people who don't see you, only what you can do for them. In the next part, we'll explore how your energy, not your words, determines the kind of respect you receive. We'll dive deeper into why people sense when someone lacks boundaries, and how reclaiming your inner authority can instantly shift the way you're treated by the world around you. Are you ready to stop rewarding those who drain you and start building the energy that demands respect without needing to say a word? You've probably noticed it before. Someone walks into a room and, without saying a single word, everyone straightens up. They don't have to speak loudly or demand attention. Their very presence commands respect. They radiate something that can't quite be explained. You don't know why, but you wouldn't dare cross their boundaries. And yet, they never had to tell you where the line was. Now compare that to your own experience. How often have you raised your voice, explained your feelings, poured your heart out, only to be ignored, dismissed, or misunderstood? How many times have you tried to ask for respect and to beg for it, and ended up feeling even smaller? The difference isn't in how loud you are, it's in how clear your energy is. Carl Jung believed the human psyche operates like a field of energy. Every thought, every emotion, every belief radiates out from you like a frequency. People feel you before they hear you. They read your posture before they read your words. And what you carry, consciously or unconsciously, teaches the world how to treat you. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, explaining your choices, softening your truths, or laughing at things that hurt, people don't just hear your voice, they feel your insecurity. And the human brain by design picks up on hierarchy, not the hierarchy of power, but of presence. When someone's energy feels fragmented or unsure, the brain unconsciously deprioritizes them. That means people stop listening. They interrupt more, they test limits, they exploit silence. And you're left wondering why you feel so invisible. even when you're trying so hard to be seen. But the answer is painful. People don't listen to words. They respond to alignment. When your body language, your tone, your beliefs, and your boundaries are in conflict, you send a mixed signal. And mixed signals always invite confusion or control. That's why the person who commands respect doesn't necessarily have more experience, more strength, or more knowledge than you. They just have more congruence. They know who they are, and that knowledge rearranges the room. This doesn't mean you need to become cold or dominant. It means you need to become integrated. You need to start treating your own time, energy, and presence as sacred, because the world takes its cue from you. If you show up to a relationship tolerating inconsistency, the relationship will give you chaos. If you walk into work with slumped shoulders and zero conviction, people will overlook you, even if you're the most competent person in the room. If you speak from a place of needing to be understood, rather than being rooted in your truth, others will feel that need and use it to shape the conversation. Let me give you a simple but powerful example. Imagine two people at a meeting. One sits with a straight posture, grounded, speaks slowly, and only says things that truly matter. The other leans forward anxiously, nods constantly, adds "sorry" to every sentence, and tries to sound agreeable. Which one is taken more seriously? The answer is obvious. And yet, many of us live as the second person without realizing it. Why? Because we were trained to. From a young age, we learned that being likable was more important than being solid, that being agreeable was safer than being clear, that people would only love us if we stayed soft, silent, and endlessly adaptable. But that version of you, the one who plays small to keep others comfortable, is costing you everything: your peace, your power, your self-respect. And the most tragic part? It's not even you. It's the mask you learned to wear so you wouldn't be rejected. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the social self we craft to survive in a world that punishes authenticity. But what happens when you start peeling it off? When you stop filtering your truth through fear, something extraordinary begins. People shift. Some will resist. Some will leave. But others, the right ones, will start responding to your real energy. Not the rehearsed you, not the polite you, the you that knows what you will and won't allow. And this isn't just spiritual theory, it's biological. Neuroscience shows that people are deeply sensitive to what's called nonverbal dominance. It's the way your brain registers certainty in another. Confident people, those who are congruent, activate different responses in those around them. They're seen as leaders even if they say less. They're respected more, even if they're younger or less experienced, because the human nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety, strength, and certainty. So if you've ever wondered why people dismiss you, interrupt you, or forget your value, ask yourself this: how congruent is my presence? Do I believe in what I say? Do I honor my own time? Do I carry myself like someone who deserves to be heard, or like someone who's just hoping not to be rejected? This is not about performance. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about remembering who you were before you were trained to doubt yourself. And from that place and that deep, grounded presence where respect becomes automatic, you won't need to argue. You won't need to chase. You won't even need to explain. Your energy will do the talking. And the people who can't meet you there, they'll fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because they were never aligned with your truth to begin with. But here's the most difficult truth. Building this kind of presence requires solitude. You can't build it while constantly giving yourself away. You can't grow into it while surrounded by people who benefit from your weakness. To become congruent, you have to step back. You have to stop filling every silence. Stop trying to win everyone's approval. You have to let the old dynamic collapse. The one where you were always the giver, the fixer, the easy one. And when that collapse happens, you will feel pain. You'll question yourself. You'll grieve the connections that couldn't survive your growth. But Jung said something powerful. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That privilege isn't cheap. It costs comfort, illusions, and old patterns. But what it gives you back is everything. Your center, your clarity, your ability to walk into a room and shift the energy, not because you're loud, but because you're whole. In the next part, we'll confront the hidden fear that keeps you trapped in these cycles, the fear of loss. We'll explore why the people who disrespect you the most are often the ones you're most afraid to let go of. and how that fear keeps you stuck in roles that destroy your self-worth one quiet day at a time. If you've ever wondered why the more you give, the less you're valued, the next part will finally show you why. Let's keep going. There's a truth you've been avoiding your entire life, not because you're weak, but because you were taught to believe the opposite. You were told that being easy to love meant always being available, that keeping people close meant never upsetting them, that if you wanted to be chosen, you had to sacrifice something first: your opinion, your voice, your time, your needs. And little by little, without even noticing, you became someone who would rather be hurt than be alone. But here's what no one warned you about. The more afraid you are of losing people, the more power they hold over you. You bend for them. You explain yourself to them. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no, all because you're terrified that if you set a boundary, if you pulled away, if you stopped being useful, they would leave. And maybe they would. But the harder truth is that they were never really there. Not for you. They were there for the version of you who made their life easier, who carried the emotional weight, who filled the silence, apologized first, forgave everything. You built your value on how much you could absorb, and you convinced yourself that this was love, that this was connection. But Carl Jung warned us about this illusion. He spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. It's a mask that smiles even when we're breaking, that agrees just to avoid tension, that plays the role of the good one, while our real self suffocates underneath. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember who you really are. If you're ready to stop explaining, stop chasing, and start reclaiming your peace on right, my silence is my power, let that truth anchor you. Have you ever caught yourself in the middle of a conversation, nodding, laughing, pretending, and suddenly realized you don't believe a word you're saying? That you're not even present, just performing? That moment of clarity is rare, but powerful. It's your real self begging to be noticed. Not by them, by you. Because here's the secret no one tells you. People only value what they believe they can lose. And if you've spent your whole life trying to be unconditionally present for others, never hard to reach, never inconvenient, always understanding, you've made yourself too available to be taken seriously. You became predictable. And in the human mind, predictability leads to devaluation. Let me give you a real example. Think about a friend who always responds immediately, always says yes, always cancels their own plans to help you with yours. At first you appreciate it, then you expect it. Eventually you take it for granted. And if one day they say they can't help, you feel frustrated, not grateful, not because you're cruel, but because the dynamic has become too familiar, the behavior too accessible. Now apply that logic to your own life. When was the last time you said no without explaining? When was the last time you chose your peace over pleasing someone? When was the last time you let someone sit in the discomfort of your silence instead of rescuing the moment? If you can't remember, then you've likely trained the people around you to ignore your limits, not because you don't have any, but because you don't enforce them. And let's be honest, why would they respect something you don't protect? The core of this pattern is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of being seen as selfish, difficult, too much. So you overcompensate. You become flexible to the point of emotional dislocation. You water yourself down to stay digestible. And then you wonder why no one treats you like you matter, but they're just following your lead. People reflect the value you place on yourself. If you act like you're replaceable, you will be treated like a placeholder. If you act like your needs are optional, people will treat them like inconveniences. And if you teach others that you're always available, they will never pause to ask what you need. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You're not just unlucky in relationships. You're not just too nice. You're caught in an unconscious loop, one where your need for connection keeps you locked in self-erasure. And the only way out is through. You must be willing to disappoint people who expect you to keep betraying yourself. This won't feel good at first. In fact, it'll feel like grief. When you finally say no to the person who always expects yes, you'll feel guilt clawing at your chest. When you pull back from the friend who only reaches out when they need something, you'll feel like the bad guy. When you stop responding to messages that drain you, the silence will be loud, unbearably loud. But that silence, that discomfort, that's the sound of healing. It's the sound of you finally taking your power back from the people who never truly deserved it. And those who only stayed for the convenience of your self-sacrifice, they will leave. Let them. Because you are not losing relationships and where you are losing illusions. And that is the price of truth. Think about it this way. If someone's presence in your life depends on your silence, on your compliance, on your exhaustion, is that really love? Or is it a transaction masked as affection? You deserve more than that. But you won't receive more until you become more grounded, more self-honoring, more unavailable to everything that once drained you. This kind of shift can feel like rebellion, but it's actually restoration. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming clear, and clarity doesn't beg for understanding. It simply walks away from what no longer fits. You don't need to explain why you're no longer answering every call, why you're no longer pretending, why you're no longer playing the role that kept you small. You only need to live it, fully and without apology. In the next part, we're going to explore what happens after the shift. When you stop explaining yourself, stop rescuing others from your absence and start sitting fully in your own presence. This is where the real transformation begins, not in the reaction of others, but in the reconstruction of your inner world. The place where silence becomes your strength and where presence becomes power. There comes a moment in everyone's life, quiet, heavy, and unforgettable, when you realize that staying available to everyone is costing you everything: your energy, your peace, your self-respect. And the hardest part? No one around you notices the price you're paying, because you've made it easy not to. You see, you were taught that disappearing is selfish, that saying no is rude, that withdrawing is cold. So you stayed, you answered, you explained, you gave more. And what did it get you? Exhaustion, resentment, the creeping realization that the more you tried to be loved, the less you were truly seen. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is for the strong, not because they don't need people, but because they no longer depend on being needed to feel worthy." This is the power that comes from pulling back, from retreating, not as a form of escape, but as a declaration. I will no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable. The moment you stop explaining yourself, something shifts, not just outside but within. Your silence begins to carry weight, not the silence of suppression or avoidance, but the silence of presence, of sovereignty. The kind of silence that no longer fills in awkward spaces, no longer rushes to please, no longer saves people from their own discomfort. And yes, at first, it will feel like something inside you is dying, because it is. The old version of you, the one who was always agreeable, always reachable, always softening her truth, that version can't survive this evolution, and it's not supposed to. That's the price of becoming whole. In the beginning, your stillness will provoke people. Your absence will scream louder than your presence ever did. People will try to pull you back into the role you used to play. The fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who bends. But this time, you won't. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've tasted the power of being centered, of choosing you. Let me be clear. Choosing yourself will cost you things. Relationships that were built on your self-abandonment will not survive your self-respect. People who relied on your silence will be disturbed by your quiet strength. But the ones who truly love you, who see you, not just what you offer, they will adjust, they will rise, or they will leave. Let them, because what's coming next for you is not about clinging to connections that require your disempowerment. It's about creating space, real, sacred space, for the relationships, the environments, the peace that align with your truth. Your silence will no longer be interpreted as weakness. It will be felt as authority. It will say everything that words use to fail at. I am no longer for everyone. I am for myself. And from that place, something miraculous happens. The world starts to reflect your new frequency. You attract differently. You speak less but are heard more. You do less, but impact more. Because now you're operating from fullness, not emptiness. From alignment, not desperation. From intention, not guilt. The truth is, you were never meant to be constantly available. You were never designed to pour endlessly. You were meant to live in cycles, to give, yes, but also to retreat, replenish, and realign. This isn't selfish. It's sustainable. It's sacred, and Jung understood this deeply. The idea that individuation, the path to becoming whole, requires shedding every false obligation you've carried until now. So let this be the moment you shed it. Let this be the chapter where you stop apologizing for the space you take up, for the boundaries you set, for the peace you protect. Let this be the turning point where your absence becomes your loudest act of self-respect, where your silence becomes your clearest boundary, where your energy no longer leaks into people and places that were never meant to hold it. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You don't need to explain why you're no longer reachable at all hours, why you stopped replying to people who never checked in on you, why you walked away from situations that once defined your identity. You don't owe anyone that version of you ever again. You've earned your way into stillness. So breathe, rest, and let the silence rebuild you. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this message spoke to something deep inside you and something you've known for a long time but never had the words to say, I invite you to take a moment now and type in the comments, I choose my peace. Let that be your declaration. Let that be your shift. And don't stop here. The next chapter is waiting. And trust me, it's one you were always meant to live. See you in the next video.